Hello, friends. You're watching The Night Watchman, where every day you'll hear a brand new horror story that will send chills down your spine. But to keep bringing you these terrifying tales, we need your love and support. So don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now let's begin the story. I was 14 the winter my parents left me alone in our house outside of Ashton, Oregon. Even now, more than 10 years later, I still can't drive through that part of town without feeling my chest tighten. Back then, our house sat at the end of a long gravel road surrounded by pine trees and frozen fields. The nearest neighbor was almost half a mile away. During the day, it looked peaceful. At night, especially in December, it felt buried from the rest of the world. My dad, Mark Hensley, worked as a truck mechanic. My mom, Laura, was a nurse at St. Vincent Medical Center in Portland. Money had been tight for years after Dad injured his shoulder, and my parents fought constantly about bills, overtime, and whether we should sell the house. That winter was worse than usual. 3 nights before Christmas, my grandfather in Idaho suffered a stroke. Mom wanted to leave immediately. Dad wanted to stay because a snowstorm was moving in across Oregon. They argued in the kitchen while I sat on the stairs pretending not to listen. "We can't leave him alone," Mom whispered harshly. "He's 14, Laura, not 4. The roads are dangerous. And your father might die." Silence. Then Mom looked toward the stairs and forced a smile when she noticed me listening. "You'll only be alone 1 night," she said. "Maybe 2 if weather gets bad." I tried acting excited because honestly, at 14, staying home alone sounded amazing. No school, video games, pizza, no parents. I had no idea that decision would stay with me for the rest of my life. Before leaving, Dad walked me through everything twice. Doors locked after dark. Don't answer for anyone. If something happens, call Sheriff Dugan. He even handed me his old baseball bat from the garage. I laughed. What am I supposed to do with this? Dad didn't laugh back. Keep it near you anyway. That should have been my first warning. The storm hit just after sunset. Snow hammered the windows, while wind shook the trees hard enough to make the house groan. By 8 o'clock, the power flickered twice. I heated frozen pizza, watched old action movies, and texted my friend Caleb until the signal got weak. At around 9:30, the lights went out completely. Everything went black. Not the peaceful kind of dark either. The kind where the silence feels alive. I grabbed flashlights from the kitchen drawer and lit a few candles Mom kept for emergencies. The house looked strange under candlelight. Longer shadows, different shapes. Outside, snow buried everything. I remember standing at the living room window thinking how isolated we really were. That's when I saw someone standing near the mailbox. At first, I thought it was a tree branch moving in the wind. Then lightning flashed across the sky. A man was standing at the end of our driveway, perfectly still, watching the house. I froze. The distance made details impossible, but I could tell he was tall and wearing something dark. Snow blew around him while he stood motionless. I told myself it was probably a stranded driver, maybe someone needing help. But something felt wrong immediately. If you've ever had that instinct, that sudden heavy feeling in your stomach, you know what I mean. I stepped away from the window. When I looked back 30 seconds later, he was gone. I locked the deadbolt again, even though it was already locked. Then I checked every downstairs window. That's when I noticed the mud. Footprints. Fresh ones beneath the kitchen window. I stared at them while my pulse hammered in my ears. Somebody had walked around the side of the house. I grabbed Dad's bat. "Hello?" I yelled weakly toward the back door. No answer. The wind outside screamed through the trees. I told myself I was overreacting. Probably old footprints. Probably nothing. Then came the knock. 3 slow hits against the front door. Thunk. Thunk, thunk, not loud, almost patient. I stopped breathing. Another knock came, then a man's voice. "Car broke down." His voice sounded deep and calm. "Can you help me?" Every instinct told me not to move. I remembered Dad's warning, don't answer for anyone. I can call someone for you," I shouted. Silence then. "Please." Something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. No panic. No urgency, just calm. I slowly peeked through the side curtain beside the door. Nobody was there. My stomach dropped. Then something tapped softly on the glass behind me. I spun around so fast I nearly fell. A face stood outside the kitchen window. A man in a black winter coat, pale skin, gray beard, dead-looking eyes. He smiled at me. Not a normal smile either. A slow one, like he already knew something I didn't. I screamed and stumbled backward. The man walked away from the window calmly and disappeared into darkness. I locked myself in the downstairs bathroom and called my parents. No signal. I tried again. Nothing. Then sheriff's dispatch. Still nothing. The storm had killed most reception. For nearly 20 minutes, I stayed hidden inside the bathroom holding Dad's bat across my knees while the house creaked around me. I kept expecting windows to shatter, or footsteps, or the sound of the door opening. Nothing happened. Eventually, I convinced myself maybe the guy had left. Maybe he realized nobody would open the door. I stepped into the hallway carefully. The house was silent. Then I heard footsteps upstairs. Slow, heavy. My entire body went numb. Somebody was inside the house. I don't even remember deciding to move. Adrenaline just took over. I ran into the kitchen and grabbed the biggest knife I could find. The footsteps continued above me, one creak at a time. My bedroom was upstairs. So was the only loaded hunting rifle Dad owned. I stared at the staircase knowing someone was up there between me and that gun. Then the footsteps stopped. Complete silence. I backed toward the living room, trying not to make noise. Suddenly the upstairs hallway light flickered on, but the power was still out. Cold fear spread through my chest. Someone upstairs had a flashlight. Then I heard my bedroom door slowly creak open. Whoever was up there was inside my room, going through my things. I ran for the front door. It wouldn't open. The handle moved, but something held the door shut from outside, like rope or chain. Panic hit me hard enough to make me dizzy. That's when I heard movement behind me upstairs again, slow footsteps descending the staircase. I backed into the living room, clutching the knife with shaking hands. A flashlight beam appeared across the wall. Then the man stepped into view. He looked older up close, maybe late 50s. Snow covered his boots. His eyes locked onto mine immediately. "You shouldn't be alone here," he said quietly. I held the knife toward him. "Get out." He tilted his head slightly. "I tried warning your father." "What?" The man sighed. Then he said something that still haunts me. "There's another one outside." A loud crash exploded from the back of the house. Glass shattered. The old man whipped his flashlight toward the kitchen. For the first time, he looked afraid. Another figure moved past the broken window. Much taller, broad shoulders, wearing a dark hooded jacket. The old man grabbed my arm hard. "Hide. Now." I tried pulling away, but his expression stopped me cold. He wasn't pretending. He was terrified. The second man climbed through the broken kitchen window slowly like he'd done it before. I heard heavy boots crunching over broken glass. The old man shoved me toward the hallway closet. "Don't come out." "What's happening?" But he ignored me. I squeezed into the closet, leaving the door barely cracked. From inside, I watched the living room. The hooded man entered, carrying something long. At first, I thought it was a pipe. Then I realized it was a crowbar. His face stayed hidden beneath the hood. The older man stepped between him and the hallway. "You shouldn't have come back," the old man said. The hooded figure laughed softly, a horrible sound. "You left witnesses before," the hooded man replied. "Witnesses, plural." My blood turned cold. The old man glanced toward my hiding place for half a second. The hooded man noticed. Everything happened at once. The hooded figure charged forward, swinging the crowbar. The old man dodged and slammed into him. Both crashed into the coffee table. I covered my mouth to stop myself from screaming. The two men fought violently across the living room. Not like movie fights. Ugly, fast, brutal. The hooded man was stronger. He smashed the crowbar into the old man's ribs with a sickening crack. The old man collapsed. Then the hooded figure pulled out a knife. A massive hunting knife. I shut my eyes as the old man screamed. The sound still follows me sometimes at night. After a few seconds, everything went quiet again. Heavy breathing filled the room. Then footsteps. Slow footsteps moving through the house. Looking, searching. For me. I stayed crammed inside that closet, barely breathing, while footsteps moved room to room downstairs. At one point, the man stopped directly outside the closet door. I could see the shadow of his boots beneath the crack. Seconds felt like hours. Then a loud sound echoed outside. Sirens. The hooded man sprinted toward the front of the house. I heard the door burst open, then nothing. Sheriff deputies found me nearly an hour later still hiding in that closet, covered in sweat and shaking uncontrollably. The older man was dead in the living room. The hooded intruder vanished into the forest before police arrived. What came afterward was worse. Investigators identified the dead man as Walter Grady, a drifter connected to multiple disappearances across Washington and Oregon during the 1990s. The second man was never officially identified, but police believe the two men had worked together for years, targeting isolated homes during winter storms. Walter apparently entered homes first, pretending to seek help. If residents resisted, the second man came later. Sheriff Dugan believed Walter turned on his partner that night for one reason: me. He thought Walter was trying to protect me before the second man arrived. Maybe guilt finally caught up with him. Maybe he saw his own grandson in me. Or maybe he simply didn't want another kid to die. Nobody knows. What police did know was far worse. Inside Walter's abandoned trailer, they discovered photographs. Dozens of them. Families, homes, children, and one picture taken from our driveway, taken weeks before that night. My parents sold the house 6 months later. Dad never forgave himself. Neither did Mom. As for me, I still sleep with locked doors and lights on in the hallway. Because 3 years after it happened, Sheriff Dugan called my family with news. A couple living near Boise reported someone standing outside their farmhouse during a snowstorm, watching the house. When deputies searched the area, they found footprints leading into the woods. Only one set, large boots, the same size as the unidentified man from our house. No suspect was ever found. Sometimes I wonder if he still walks through isolated towns during storms, looking through windows for families dumb enough to answer the door. And every winter, when snow starts falling late at night, I remember the smile on that old man's face at the kitchen window. The smile of someone who already knew how the night would end. Story 2. I woke up to the sound of silence, the kind that presses against your eardrums and makes you question if the world outside still existed. My name is Ethan Caldwell, 12 years old, and I was supposed to be the luckiest kid in Willow Creek, Vermont. At least that's what my parents kept saying as they loaded their suitcases into the Uber at 4 a.m. 2 whole weeks in Paris for our anniversary, Mom had beamed, kissing my forehead. Mrs. Hargrove from next door will check on you every evening. You've got the list, the emergency numbers, and the new security system. You're our big man now. Dad ruffled my hair. No wild parties, champ. And stay out of the attic. That realtor said it needs structural work. They laughed like it was a joke. I didn't. The house was a hulking Victorian on Maple Lane, built in 1897, bought cheap because the previous owners had moved suddenly. That's how the realtor put it. I'd overheard her whispering to my parents about the Millers, the family that lived here before. Their son, Elias, 10 years old, had vanished one winter night in 2019. No signs of forced entry, no footprints in the snow, just an open attic window and a single red mitten left on the sill. Kids at school called it the Caldwell curse now that we'd moved in. I ignored them until my parents left. Day 1 was normal. I played video games until midnight, ate cereal for dinner, and slept with every light on. Day 2, the noises started. It was a soft scratching, like fingernails on wood, coming from above my bedroom ceiling. I told myself it was squirrels. Vermont winters are brutal and old houses settle, but the scratching followed a rhythm. 3 short scrapes, 2 long ones, almost like a code. By the 3rd night, the power flickered during a snowstorm. The new security system beeped once and died. I checked my phone. No signal. The landline was dead too. Mrs. Hargrove's house across the street was dark. She'd mentioned visiting her sister in Burlington. I was alone. That's when I found the journal. I wasn't supposed to go into the attic, but the scratching had turned into whispers. Not words exactly, just a child's voice humming an old lullaby my grandmother used to sing. Hush, little baby, don't say a word. The trapdoor in the hallway ceiling opened with a groan when I poked it with a broom. A ladder unfolded automatically, like it had been waiting. The attic smelled of dust, cedar, and something metallic. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw boxes, old furniture, and a small wooden desk in the corner. On it lay a leather-bound notebook, its cover cracked with age. The first page was dated December 12th, 2019. My name is Elias Miller. If you're reading this, he already knows you're here. I flipped pages with shaking hands. Elias wrote about hearing the same scratching. He drew pictures of a tall figure with long arms and no face, standing at the foot of his bed. The last entry was frantic. He doesn't want me to leave. He says this house needs a new boy. I hid the key in the... The writing stopped mid-sentence, smeared with something dark brown. A loud bang came from downstairs. I stuffed the journal in my hoodie and scrambled down the ladder, slamming the trapdoor shut. The kitchen light was on even though I'd turned everything off. On the table sat a glass of milk and a plate of cookies. Chocolate chip, my favorite. Steam rose from them. They were fresh. I hadn't baked anything. I backed away, heart hammering. The security cameras my dad installed were blank. No footage. The front door was still locked from inside. Snow fell heavily outside the windows, sealing the neighborhood in white silence. That night I barricaded myself in my room with a baseball bat and my dad's old hunting knife from the garage. Sleep never came. At 3:17 a.m., the scratching returned, directly above my bed now. Then the voice, clear, close, childlike, but wrong. Ethan, play with me. I didn't answer. The voice giggled, then sighed like an old man. You can't leave either. The house gets lonely. Morning light brought temporary courage. I tried biking to the police station 2 miles away, but my tires were slashed. All 4. Deep cuts. Precise. On the garage door, someone, or something, had scratched a single word in the frost. Soon. I spent the day setting traps like in those old movies. Marbles on the stairs, string tied to cans, nails under the windows. It felt stupid until the first intruder came that evening. He was real. A tall man in a dark parka, face hidden by a ski mask, trying the back door. I watched from the upstairs window as he jimmied the lock. This wasn't the ghost. This was the kind of danger my parents warned me about. Home invasion in a rich, isolated neighborhood. But when the man stepped inside, the real horror began. The temperature dropped so fast my breath fogged. The man froze mid-step, head tilting like he heard something. Then he screamed. Not a yell of pain, a wet, gurgling sound like his throat was filling with liquid. He dropped to his knees, clawing at his own face. Blood trickled from his eyes. From the shadows in the hallway, I saw it. A silhouette, impossibly tall, arms dragging on the floor. No face, just a pale oval. It reached for the intruder with fingers that looked too long, jointed wrong. The man's scream cut off. His body jerked once, then went still. The shadow dragged him toward the basement door, which opened by itself. I heard wet sounds. Dragging, then nothing. I nearly vomited. The house wasn't haunted by a ghost. It was alive, and it was hungry. It used fear like bait. The scratching, the cookies, the voice, they were lures. Elias had written that the entity needed a new boy to keep it company, to feed on the loneliness it created. The previous owners had fled after their son disappeared, but the house always found tenants, always found children. I was the latest. For the next 3 days, I fought back the only way I knew how, by staying awake and refusing to play. I discovered Elias's hidden key in the attic, tucked behind a loose brick. It opened a small metal box containing Polaroids of previous children who had lived here, all smiling at first, then growing hollow-eyed in later shots. Dates stretched back decades. Some houses don't just hold memories. This one collected boys. The entity grew impatient. Lights flickered in patterns. Doors slammed. My reflection in mirrors started moving half a second too late. On the 6th night, with the snow still trapping me, the voice stopped pretending to be a child. It spoke in my father's voice. Ethan, come downstairs. Mom and I are home early. I almost went. The longing in that voice was perfect. Tired, loving, real. Tears stung my eyes. I was so damn lonely. My parents had left me. Mrs. Hargrove never came. The world outside might as well have forgotten I existed. But I remembered the journal. Elias had written, "It wears their faces. Don't listen." I screamed instead, "You're not my dad!" and ran for the attic. The ladder wouldn't unfold. The trapdoor was sealed as if it had never existed. Footsteps, heavy, wet, climbed the stairs behind me. I barricaded myself in the bathroom, bat in one hand, knife in the other. The door handle turned slowly, then the power died completely. In the pitch black, I felt cold breath on my neck. Long fingers brushed my hair. A whisper right in my ear. "You're home now, Ethan. Forever." I swung the bat blindly. It connected with something solid yet soft, like meat over bone. A hiss of pain, not human. I slashed with the knife and felt warm fluid spray across my arm. The thing roared, a sound that vibrated in my teeth. I kicked the bathroom door open and ran, tripping over the intruder's body in the hallway. It was shriveled now, mummified, like it had been drained. The front door was open. Snow swirled in. Freedom. But as I stepped onto the porch, the house groaned like a living thing. Every window lit up blood red. The shadow stretched out the doorway behind me, growing taller, filling the frame. I ran into the snow, legs burning, but the streetlights flickered and died one by one. Maple Lane stretched endlessly in both directions, houses dark and empty. I was still on the porch. No matter how far I ran, the front door was always 3 steps behind me. The house had expanded its boundaries, or my mind had. I collapsed in the snow exhausted. The shadow loomed over me. No face, but I felt it smiling. "Play with me, Ethan." In that moment, I understood. The house didn't want to kill me. It wanted me to stay, to become the next Elias, to lure the next child when my parents eventually sold the place again. I smiled back, teeth chattering. "Okay, I'll play." The shadow paused, surprised. I stood up slowly and walked back inside. The door closed gently behind me. Lights returned to normal. Warmth flooded the house. I went to the kitchen, made cookies, and left them on the table. Then I sat in the living room with the journal open on my lap and began writing. "My name is Ethan Caldwell. If you're reading this, he already knows you're here." Upstairs, the scratching started again. This time I answered it with the same rhythm. 3 short, 2 long. We were learning to speak the same language. The snow kept falling. Somewhere far away, my parents were probably enjoying Paris. They would come home to a quiet house, a clean house, a house that was no longer lonely. Story 3. I was 15 years old when my parents left me alone for the first time in our house on Briarwood Lane in northern Ohio. Even now, almost 8 years later, I still can't sleep in complete silence. Back then, our town of Ashford Heights looked like one of those quiet American suburbs people imagine are safe. Clean sidewalks, maple trees, neighbors who waved while mowing their lawns, kids riding bikes until sunset. Nothing bad was supposed to happen there, especially not to me. My father, Daniel Mercer, worked as a truck mechanic, and my mother, Laura Mercer, was a hospice nurse. They weren't rich, but they worked hard enough to buy a 2-story colonial house near the woods at the edge of town. The house had history, not haunted history, real history. A retired police officer named Walter Grady had lived there before us. He died in the upstairs bedroom from a heart attack 5 years before we moved in. People in town used to whisper that he had become paranoid near the end of his life. According to one neighbor, he installed extra locks everywhere and kept curtains closed day and night because he believed someone was watching him from the woods. My dad laughed when he heard those stories. "Old man probably watched too many crime shows," he'd said. At first I agreed. Then strange things started happening after we moved in. Nothing dramatic, just little things. The back porch light turning on by itself, footprints near the tree line after rain, the dog barking at the woods every night around 2 a.m. My parents ignored it all. I tried to ignore it too. Until the weekend they left me home alone. It happened in October of 2018. My grandmother in Pennsylvania had suffered a stroke, and my parents needed to drive there immediately. I had a bad flu and couldn't travel. My dad wanted me to stay with neighbors, but I insisted I'd be fine alone for 2 nights. I regret begging them. I remember standing in the kitchen while rain tapped softly against the windows. "You sure you'll be okay?" Mom asked. "I'm 15, not 5, I said. Dad handed me his old baseball bat anyway. "Keep this near your bed." I laughed. He didn't. Before leaving, my father checked every door twice. Every lock, every window. At the time, I thought he was overreacting. Now I understand why. By 7:30 p.m., their SUV disappeared down the wet street, leaving me alone in the house. The silence hit immediately. Not normal silence. Heavy silence. The kind that makes every creak sound important. I spent the evening watching horror movies in the living room while rain hammered the roof. Around 10 p.m., I microwaved leftover pizza and texted my friend Mason. "Home alone all weekend," he replied instantly. "Perfect setup for murder." I sent back a laughing emoji, but something about the empty house suddenly made me uneasy. At 10:47 p.m., the dog started growling. His name was Rusty, a golden retriever that almost never barked aggressively, but now he stood near the sliding glass back door with his fur raised, growling toward the woods. I walked over and looked outside. Nothing, just darkness beyond the yard. Rain, trees moving in the wind. Then I noticed something strange. The back porch light was off. I clearly remembered turning it on earlier, before I could think about it further. The light flicked back on, by itself. I froze. Rusty barked violently. "Relax," I whispered, though my voice sounded shaky. I checked the lock on the door. Locked. I closed the curtains and went upstairs. That should have been the end of it. But around midnight I heard footsteps. Not upstairs. Outside. Slow footsteps circling the house. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Wet leaves. I muted the TV in my bedroom. The footsteps stopped too. For almost 30 seconds everything was quiet. Then 3 knocks. From downstairs. Not loud. Gentle. Almost polite. My chest tightened instantly. I grabbed my phone. No signal. Not one bar. That made no sense because our service was always strong. I tried Wi-Fi. Disconnected. Then another knock came, this time from the kitchen window. I slowly walked into the hallway overlooking the first floor. Every light downstairs was off except the dim kitchen light above the sink. And standing outside the kitchen window was a man. I only saw him for a second. Tall, wearing a dark raincoat, motionless, just staring into the house. I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly fell. When I looked again, he was gone. My breathing turned shallow. I locked my bedroom door and called my parents repeatedly. Nothing connected. I told myself to calm down. Maybe it was a neighbor. Maybe someone needed help. Maybe... A loud metallic sound exploded downstairs. Clang, like something hitting the back door. Rusty barked furiously, then whimpered. Then silence. Complete silence. I grabbed the baseball bat and stepped into the hallway. "Rusty," I whispered. No response. My dog always came when called. Always. The staircase groaned beneath my feet as I descended slowly into darkness. Every instinct screamed at me to go back upstairs. But I kept moving. The living room was empty. The kitchen light still glowed faintly. Rainwater had blown against the glass door, and Rusty was nowhere. My stomach dropped. Then I noticed the back door. Open, only slightly, about 3 inches. Cold wind drifted inside. I know I locked that door. I rushed forward and slammed it shut, locking it immediately. That's when I saw the muddy footprints, large boot prints, leading from the back door. Into the house, not out. In. My hands started shaking so badly I almost dropped the bat. The footprints disappeared around the corner toward the laundry room hallway. Someone was inside. I backed away slowly, trying not to make noise. Then, a floorboard creaked upstairs. I looked up instantly. Someone was on the 2nd floor, above me. I can't explain the fear that hit me in that moment. It felt primal. My entire body knew I was in danger before my mind fully accepted it. I ran for the front door. Locked. I unlocked it frantically, but it wouldn't open. Something heavy was against it from outside. Panic exploded in my chest. Then footsteps sprinted upstairs, fast, heavy. I turned and saw a shadow move across the second-floor hallway. Whoever it was had been waiting, watching. I bolted into the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife I could find. My phone suddenly buzzed. One text message. Unknown number. I wouldn't go outside. I nearly dropped the phone. Another text arrived immediately. I've been inside before. My vision blurred with panic. I called 911. This time the call connected for half a second before cutting out. Then every light in the house went dark. Total blackness. The power had been cut. Rain pounded outside. I heard slow footsteps descending the staircase. Thump, thump, thump. I backed into the kitchen corner, holding the knife and bat like they'd actually help. The footsteps stopped halfway down the stairs. Then a man's voice echoed softly through the darkness. I know you're alone, Evan. Hearing my name nearly broke me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. I ran, straight through the dining room toward the garage entrance. I slammed the garage button repeatedly. Nothing. Power outage, of course. Then I heard movement behind me. Fast. I spun around and saw him for the first time clearly. Tall, thin, middle-aged. Rain dripping from a black coat. His face looked pale and exhausted, almost sickly. But his eyes were calm. That terrified me more than anything. He didn't rush me, didn't yell. He simply stood there holding a flashlight. You shouldn't have stayed alone, he said quietly. I swung the bat wildly. He stepped back easily, then smiled. Not a crazy smile, a familiar one, like he knew something I didn't. I ran into the garage storage room and locked the door behind me. Immediately he began walking toward it, slowly. No panic, no anger, just patience. Then he spoke again. Walter used to hide in here too. My blood went cold. Walter Grady, the previous owner, the retired cop. How do you know that? I shouted. Silence, then. Because he saw me in the woods first. The doorknob rattled violently. I shoved shelves against the door while trying to call 911 again. One bar appeared, then disappeared. I started crying without realizing it. Not loud, just terrified tears running down my face. Outside the door, the man stopped moving. For several seconds, there was only rain. Then he whispered. He thought locks would save him too. I heard footsteps moving away again. Then silence. Complete silence. That somehow felt worse. I stayed hidden for nearly 20 minutes before hearing something outside. Sirens, real sirens. Red and blue lights flashed through the garage window. I screamed for help and shoved the shelves aside. Police stormed the house within minutes, but the man was gone. Vanished. Officers searched the woods for hours. They found nothing except Rusty hiding under bushes nearly half a mile away. My parents returned before sunrise. I still remember my mother crying while hugging me in the kitchen. Police initially believed it was a trespasser trying to scare me, until they found something disturbing. Inside the basement wall behind old shelves, officers discovered dozens of photographs, pictures of our house, taken over years. Some were from before we even moved in. Others were recent, very recent. One photo showed me sleeping in my bedroom. Another showed my mother unloading groceries. And one picture, taken only days before, showed my father locking the front door. On the back of that photograph were 3 words written in black marker. Locks never helped. The investigation uncovered another horrifying detail. Walter Grady, the previous homeowner, had called police multiple times before his death, claiming someone was entering his home at night. Nobody believed him. Officers assumed dementia or paranoia. No evidence was ever found. Case closed. Until my night alone proved he was telling the truth. The police never identified the man. No fingerprints, no DNA, nothing. For months afterward, patrol cars watched our street nightly. My parents sold the house 6 months later. Even now, I still wake up sometimes imagining those slow footsteps downstairs. But the worst part came 2 years later. I was helping my father unpack old boxes in our new home outside Columbus when I found something hidden inside one of his toolboxes. A photograph, old, faded, taken through our kitchen window at night. In the picture, 15-year-old me stood alone near the sink, and behind me, Barely visible in the darkness of the hallway was the man in the black coat. The photo had been taken 3 weeks before my parents ever left me home alone. Story 4. I never imagined that a simple family vacation mix-up would trap me in a nightmare that felt ripped from the coldest Chicago winter. My name is Ethan Harper, and I was 12 years old when it happened back in December 2018. We lived in a big old Victorian house on Maplewood Lane in Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. The kind of place with creaky hardwood floors, tall windows that rattled in the wind, and a basement that always smelled like damp earth and forgotten memories. Dad, a corporate lawyer, had bought it cheap because the previous owners had left in a hurry. Mom always joked it had character. I hated how the characters seemed to watch me. The backstory started months earlier. My parents were planning a Christmas trip to Aspen with my older sister Mia, who was 16 and obsessed with skiing. I was supposed to go too, but I came down with a nasty stomach flu the night before. Mom decided I should stay with Aunt Rachel, who lived nearby. But Aunt Rachel's flight got canceled last minute due to a blizzard warning, and in the chaos of packing and arguing over Uber schedules, everyone assumed someone else had handled me. They left at 4 a.m. for O'Hare. I woke up alone in an empty house with a note on the kitchen counter. "Be good, Ethan. Love you. Call if you need anything." Mom. I wasn't scared at first. This was my chance to live like a king. I raided the fridge, watched horror movies I wasn't allowed to see, and played video games until my eyes burned. The house felt huge and quiet, snow piling up outside like a white wall sealing me in. But by the second night, little things started happening. It began with the basement door. I'd sworn I closed it after grabbing snacks, but it stood wide open, cold air drifting up the stairs like breath from a freezer. Then the phone rang at 2:17 a.m., an old landline in Dad's study that barely worked. I picked it up, static. Then a low voice, almost whispering, "Ethan, you're home alone, aren't you?" I slammed it down, heart hammering. Probably a wrong number or a prank. I told myself that. The next morning I found footprints in the snow around the back porch, size 12 boots, circling the house. Not the mailman's. They stopped right under my bedroom window. I checked the locks twice. Evanston was safe, right? Quiet suburb, good schools, families with minivans and golden retrievers. But I remembered the stories Dad mentioned once when he thought I wasn't listening. The previous owners, a couple named the Whitakers. Their teenage son, Daniel, had disappeared in 2014. Police found his backpack in the basement, but no body. The parents moved out 6 months later, the mom whispering to neighbors about things moving in the walls. I shook it off as urban legend, until the third night. I was in the living room eating cold pizza when the power flickered. Once, twice. Then everything went black except for the faint glow of my phone. Wind howled outside. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the breaker box in the basement. Every step down those wooden stairs echoed too loudly. The air felt thicker, heavier. At the bottom, my light caught something on the far wall. Fresh scratches, deep gouges in the old paneling that hadn't been there before. They looked like letters. I stepped closer. "Stay!" My breath fogged in the air. The temperature had dropped sharply. Then I heard it. Footsteps upstairs. Slow, deliberate, right above my head in the hallway. Heavy boots on hardwood. Not my sneakers. Not imaginary. I froze, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The steps moved toward my bedroom. I heard my door creak open. A drawer rattled. Someone was searching for something. I wanted to scream, but my throat closed. Instead, I slipped behind the old furnace, killing the flashlight. Silence stretched forever. Then the footsteps returned, descending the basement stairs. One by one, pausing on each. I barely breathed. A shadow stretched across the floor, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a dark coat. He stopped at the bottom. I could smell him, wet wool, cigarettes, and something metallic. He stood there for what felt like minutes, breathing heavily. Then he spoke, voice raspy and low, like he hadn't used it in years. "Daniel, you down here, son? Daddy's home." My blood turned to ice. Daniel, the missing boy. This man thought I was him, or was he pretending? He shuffled closer to the furnace. I could see his face now in the faint moonlight leaking through a small window. Gaunt, unshaven, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in weeks. A long scar ran down his left cheek. He carried a large hunting knife, the blade catching the light. I waited until he turned toward the other side of the basement, then bolted up the stairs on silent feet, years of playing hide-and-seek paying off. I locked the basement door from the kitchen side and shoved a chair under the knob. My hands shook as I dialed 911. No signal. The storm must have knocked out the tower. The landline was dead too. Cord cut clean. He started pounding on the basement door. "Ethan, I know you're alone. I've been watching this house for weeks. Your family left you behind, just like they left Daniel." His laugh was wet and broken. "I used to live here, kid. This is my home. Daniel was my boy. They took him from me. Now I come back every Christmas, looking for what's mine." Backstory clicked into place in my terrified mind. I'd overheard Dad arguing with a realtor once. The Whitaker father had been unstable, suspected in his own son's disappearance. He'd vanished after the investigation went cold, presumed dead or on the run. But he wasn't dead. He'd been squatting nearby, waiting for new owners, waiting for another boy left vulnerable. I ran to the front door, but fresh snowdrifts had it jammed. Back door same. Windows on the ground floor were locked tight with old security pins Dad installed after a break-in scare last year. The man, Mr. Whitaker, smashed something in the basement. Glass shattered. He was coming up another way. I needed traps, like in those movies, but real. I remembered the marbles in my room from an old game set. I scattered them across the top of the basement stairs after quietly reopening the door a crack. In the kitchen, I boiled water and set up a precarious stack of pots near the back hallway. I grabbed Dad's old golf clubs from the closet and hid one under the couch. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. The pounding stopped. Silence again. Worse than noise. Then the living room window exploded inward. He'd circled the house in the blizzard. Snow and glass sprayed across the carpet. Whitaker climbed through, bleeding from a cut on his arm, knife in hand. His eyes locked on me. "You're not Daniel," he growled, sounding almost disappointed. "But you'll do. No one leaves kids alone. Not in my house." I ran. He chased, boots crunching glass. I led him toward the kitchen, dodging the boiling water trap as I ducked. He hit it perfectly. The pots crashed down, scalding water splashing his legs. He roared in pain but kept coming, faster than I expected. In the hallway, he slipped on the marbles I'd scattered earlier, crashing hard into the wall. The knife skittered away. I grabbed the golf club and swung with everything I had. It connected with his knee. A sick crack. He went down but grabbed my ankle, pulling me with him. His grip was iron. Up close, I saw madness and grief in his eyes. Years of loss twisting him into this monster. "Why do they always leave you?" he whispered, reaching for the knife again. I kicked his face, scrambled free, and ran upstairs. He limped after me, cursing. In my parents' room, I barricaded the door with their heavy dresser. He slammed against it, over and over. The wood splintered. I climbed out the window onto the snowy roof, phone finally getting one bar. I called 911, screaming my address as wind whipped snow into my eyes. Whitaker broke through. He climbed out after me, blood staining the snow. The roof was slippery. He lunged. I dodged, and his momentum carried him too far. He slipped, grabbing the edge at the last second. For a moment, our eyes met. I could have helped him. Part of me wanted to. He was just a broken father, lost in grief. But the other part remembered the knife, the voice on the phone, the scratches in the basement. I stepped back. His fingers lost their grip. He fell 2 stories into the backyard, landing on the old wrought iron fence with a sound I'll never forget. Sirens wailed in the distance. I climbed down carefully using the trellis, legs shaking. Police found me huddled on the porch, covered in snow and someone else's blood. They said Whitaker had been living in abandoned houses nearby, obsessed with reclaiming his old home and replacing his lost son. He'd been watching our family for days, waiting for the perfect moment when I was truly alone. The house sold quickly after that. My family never spent another night there. Mom still checks on me twice a night when I visit home, even though I'm in college now. Sometimes, late at night in my dorm, I still hear footsteps on hardwood and a raspy voice calling my name. but I know it's just memories, or at least I tell myself that. Story 5. I was 16 when my parents left me alone for the first time in our house on Black Ridge Road, just outside of Ashford, Oregon. It wasn't supposed to be a big deal. My dad had a trucking business that kept him away half the month anyway, and my mom worked long hospital shifts at St. Mercy Medical Center. I'd spent plenty of nights alone before, but never more than a few hours. This time was different. My aunt in Seattle had suffered a stroke, and my parents had to leave immediately for 3 days. Dad stood in the driveway before leaving, gripping my shoulder harder than usual. "You lock every door before sunset," he said, "and don't open the door for anybody. I don't care who they say they are." I laughed a little. "Dad, I'm not 12. But he didn't laugh back. That should have been my first warning. The second warning came from Mrs. Weller. She was our elderly neighbor across the road, the type who watched everyone through half-open curtains. As my parents' SUV backed out of the driveway, she walked slowly to our mailbox wearing a faded blue robe despite the cold. "You staying here alone?" she asked. "Just till Sunday." She looked past me toward the woods behind our house. Then she said something that made my stomach tighten. "If anybody knocks after midnight, don't answer, even if they know your name." I forced a smile. "Okay." But she kept staring at me like she wanted to say more. Then she slowly walked back inside. That evening, rain rolled over Ashford in heavy gray sheets, the kind that rattled windows and made the whole neighborhood feel empty. Our house sat isolated at the edge of Black Ridge Road. Behind us stretched miles of pine forest. No streetlights, no nearby houses except the Weller's place across the road. At first, being alone felt amazing. I ordered pizza, played Xbox downstairs, and blasted music louder than my parents ever allowed. Around 10 p.m., my best friend Tyler called me. "You lucky bastard," he laughed. "If my parents left me alone for 3 days, I'd throw a party." Yeah, until my dad murdered me afterward. We joked around for nearly an hour before hanging up. By midnight, the storm got worse. Wind slammed against the siding hard enough to shake the walls. I turned off the TV and headed upstairs, carrying leftover pizza with me. That's when I noticed the back door. Open, just slightly. A thin line of darkness showed between the frame. I froze halfway across the kitchen. I knew I'd locked it earlier. I walked slowly toward it, every sound in the house suddenly feeling too loud. The cold air coming through the cracks smelled like wet dirt and pine trees. I pulled the door shut fast and locked it. Then I checked every window downstairs. Everything else was secure. I told myself the wind must have forced it open somehow. Still, I suddenly couldn't stop thinking about what Dad had said. Lock every door before sunset. At 12:43 a.m., the knocking started. 3 slow knocks. Thunk, 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 coming from the front door. Every hair on my arm stood up. Nobody visited our house that late. I stayed completely still upstairs, listening. Another 3 knocks. Thunk, 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 then silence. I slowly walked to my bedroom window and carefully lifted the curtain. A man stood on our porch, tall, wearing a dark raincoat. I couldn't see his face clearly because the porch light flickered from the storm, but he wasn't moving, just standing there, watching the house. I stepped back from the window immediately. My heart started pounding so hard it hurt. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. For a second, there was only static. Then a man's voice whispered, "Your father forgot to lock the basement window." The call disconnected. I nearly dropped my phone. Every part of me suddenly felt ice cold. I rushed downstairs and grabbed the kitchen knife block, pulling out the biggest knife my parents owned. The knocking stopped, but I could still hear movement outside. Slow footsteps on the porch, then the sound of someone dragging something across wood. Skrrr, rape. I backed into the kitchen and stared toward the hallway leading to the basement door. The basement. I suddenly remembered something terrifying. Our basement window had been cracked for months. Dad kept saying he'd fix it. I moved slowly toward the basement door. The entire first floor felt darker somehow. The rain hammered the house while thunder rattled overhead. I gripped the knife so tightly my hand cramped. Then I heard it, a sound from downstairs. Not loud, just soft movement, like someone stepping carefully across concrete. I stopped breathing. There was somebody in my basement. I immediately ran upstairs and locked myself inside my bedroom. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my phone while dialing 911. A dispatcher answered quickly. 911, what's your emergency? I think somebody broke into my house. What's your address? I gave it to her fast. Are you safe right now? I'm upstairs in my room. Stay there. Officers are on the way. Then she asked, can you hear the intruder? I listened carefully. At first, nothing. Then, creak, a floorboard downstairs. Another one. Slow footsteps. Inside my house. The dispatcher kept talking, trying to calm me down, but I barely heard her. The footsteps moved through the kitchen, then the living room, then the stairs. Slow, deliberate. Whoever it was wasn't rushing. That terrified me more than anything. They already knew I was there. The footsteps climbed higher, one stair at a time. I stared at my bedroom door while gripping the knife with sweaty hands. The dispatcher whispered, police are 2 minutes away. The footsteps stopped outside my room. Complete silence, then came a soft knock. 3 slow knocks. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Exactly like before. I couldn't move. Then a voice came through the door. Calm, almost friendly. Ethan. I felt my stomach drop. I never told anyone on the phone my name, not even the dispatcher. The voice continued softly. I just want to talk. I stayed silent. Then I heard him breathing outside the door. Slow, patient. I knew your father, he whispered. The floor creaked as he leaned closer. He should have stayed buried. My blood turned cold. Before I could react, bang! Something slammed against my bedroom door so hard the frame shook. I screamed and stumbled backward. Another slam. Bang! The wood cracked near the handle. The dispatcher yelled through my phone. Officers are outside. Stay where you are. Red and blue lights flashed through my bedroom window. Suddenly the banging stopped. I heard rapid footsteps downstairs. Then silence again. Seconds later came shouting outside. Police! Stop! A door slammed. Then nothing. Absolute silence. Officers searched the property for over an hour. They found muddy footprints throughout the basement and kitchen, but no intruder. He had vanished into the woods behind our house. One officer asked if anything had been stolen. I said no, but that wasn't true. After the police left, I noticed something missing from the hallway closet downstairs. An old cardboard box. It belonged to my father. I'd seen him hide it years earlier. Inside were newspaper clippings, photographs, and VHS tapes connected to a murder case from 1998. A woman named Claire Holloway had disappeared near Blackridge Road. My father used to work with the county sheriff's office back then. He never talked about the case. Not once. The next morning, I called Dad immediately. The moment I mentioned the stranger, he went silent. Then he asked something strange. Did he say anything about Claire? I felt sick. How did you know that name? Dad exhaled slowly. Because the man you saw should be dead. He finally told me the truth. Back in 1998, a local drifter named Raymond Voss became the prime suspect in Claire Holloway's disappearance. My father and another deputy cornered him near Blackridge Forest during a storm. According to the official report, Raymond attacked them and fled into the river below the cliffs. His body was never found. But before disappearing, Raymond kept repeating one thing. You buried the wrong person. Dad admitted something else too. The missing evidence box contained photographs proving Claire Holloway's body had never actually been recovered. The sheriff's department covered it up to avoid public panic. They declared her dead anyway. For 28 years, nobody talked about it again. Until now. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. At around 2 a.m., the power suddenly went out. The entire house fell into darkness. I grabbed my phone flashlight immediately. Then came a sound from downstairs. The basement door opening. Slowly. I called out weakly. Hello? No answer. Just the sound of wet footsteps on the floor below. I wanted to believe it was police returning. Or maybe Dad somehow coming home early. But deep down, I already knew. The flashlight trembled in my hand as I stepped into the upstairs hallway. The darkness below looked endless. Then my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. I answered carefully. Static crackled again. Then the same voice whispered, "She's still under the house." The line went dead. At that exact moment, I heard something beneath me. Not footsteps, scratching, coming from inside the walls. I backed away in terror. Then, a woman screamed, not outside, not downstairs, inside the basement. A horrifying, muffled scream. I ran. I bolted into my bedroom, slammed the door shut, and shoved my desk against it. The screaming stopped immediately. Then silence. 10 seconds later came 3 soft knocks. Thunk, thunk, thunk. I stared at the door while tears ran down my face. Then the voice whispered one final sentence. "Ask your father where Claire really is." The police returned after my second 911 call. This time they searched the basement completely. Near the far concrete wall, officers discovered a section of flooring that sounded hollow underneath. They broke it open around dawn, and they found human remains buried beneath the house. Not one body, 2. One belonged to Claire Holloway, the second belonged to Raymond Voss. The investigation that followed destroyed multiple lives. My father confessed 3 weeks later. Claire had been accidentally killed during an interrogation in 1998. Raymond witnessed it. To protect themselves, the deputies murdered Raymond too and hid both bodies beneath our house while blaming him publicly for Claire's disappearance. My father went to prison before winter arrived. Mrs. Weller moved away shortly afterward. Before leaving, she told me something I still think about constantly. "I used to see that man standing near your basement window at night," she whispered, "even after they said he died." I asked her if she meant Raymond, but she just shook her head slowly. Then she said, "No, the other one." I sold the house years later, but sometimes, usually during storms, I still wake up around 12:43 a.m., and every once in a while, I hear 3 slow knocks, thunk, thunk, thunk.